Happy Wednesday. We continue looking at this very important passage, at least important to Brentwood Baptist Church, of Acts 14, 1 through 3. As we've talked about, this is a huge moment in the life of the church as now Jesus is pushing his church out from the Jewish community into the Gentile world. We're now seeing the gospel get beyond its Jewish roots and into the Gentile culture. It is an amazing moment, and to lead this moment, Jesus is calling out two people. He's calling out Barnabas and he's calling out Paul. Saul in this story, but it's Paul. Now here's the interesting thing. Paul is called in his dramatic conversion experience in chapter 9. Now, at long last, he is sent in chapter 13. Now that is a huge gap. It's even more of a gap when you realize what Paul says happened between the time of his conversion and the time that he started his ministry. According to Paul, he met Christ on the road to Damascus, went and found believers, Ananias being one of them, and then went to Jerusalem, and people met him and talked with him. The church didn't know what to do with him, and so they tried. The enemies of the church, his enemies, tried to kill him. And the church snuck him out. He was in the desert, he tells us, for 3 years, studying, trying to figure out what it meant between who Jesus was and what Jesus did and what the Old Testament prophets said. That's why so many of Paul's letters are filled with Old Testament quotations. He then goes to Tarsus, not knowing what will happen next. Barnabas goes to Antioch, see what God is doing. And then he goes and gets Paul, brings Paul back, and Paul and Barnabas are two of the 5 leaders of the church in Antioch. The church is growing, the church is thriving, and then Jesus calls Barnabas and Paul to the ministry. Now, what in the world is going on? A lot of us have this misunderstanding that if I am called to do something, then I am ready right then to go do whatever Christ is calling me to do. If I'm called to the ministry, if I'm called to missions or some kind of engagement, then I must leave right now and go do that. We don't understand that between the calling and the sending, there's always preparation. So a lot of us have been called, but we haven't been sent. And we haven't been sent because we haven't done the necessary preparation that would make us ready to be sent. We're called, that's true. You know the moment, you know what God told you to do, but he's never opened the door for you to do that. Why? Because you didn't do the next thing to get ready. Now, when I was called to be a pastor, to preach, that meant I would go to seminary. That meant I would do what I needed to do to prepare myself to be able to study the scripture at this level and prepare sermons on a weekly basis, as well as lead a local congregation. Now, that was a long time between me being a young teenager, telling my little church in Huntsville, Alabama, that I felt called to the ministry, and my mid-20s when I actually became a pastor. There was a long time between that, but nobody misunderstood it. Nobody thought at 12 or 13 that I was ready to pastor a church. They knew I would spend the next whatever years getting ready to do what I was called to do. So if you're called and not yet sent, then my question to you would be, what do you lack in your preparation? What is it that you need to do next to get ready for what Jesus is wanting you to do? For instance, some of you are called to work with a particular language group. My first question to you would be, have you learned the language? You're called to lead a Bible study. What are you doing to be trained in how to study the Bible? Are you in a group that are with people who are encouraging and building you to that moment when you will be sent? What are you doing to make sure that the moment that Jesus calls you, you are as ready as you know how to be? If there's a gap between the calling and the sending, it's because there's a need for preparation. So, here's your question. What is it that you need to do to be prepared for the moment when Jesus wants to send you to the ministry to which you were called? I'll give you 60 seconds. Think about it, and I'll see you tomorrow.